So Tulsi Gabbard went on MSNBC this morning. So she announced her presidency, her run for the presidency. Well, let's back it up a little bit more. Back in 2016, she resigned from the DNC because she was wanting to endorse Bernie Sanders for president, and she called out their rigged debate schedule that was in favor of Hillary Clinton. So she became the enemy of the DNC establishment at that moment. And then she went on in 2017 to go to Syria because she wanted to see for herself what was happening there. So she didn't go along with another regime change war that she just got out of in Iraq. She did 2 tours in Iraq as a major. And she saw her brothers and sisters get killed in that war. So she went to Syria. And she comes back and says, hey, we should not intervene in Syria. We should get out of there, and we should stop funding the terrorists because we're actually funding terrorists in Syria. So then she announces for president. So now she in her speech, she comes out against the military-industrial complex, the new Cold War. She wants to end it, and she wants to work with our enemies instead of having war. Immediately, NBC smeared her. Immediately, they said, oh, my God, we're Russians. And here's how they smeared her. The Russia propaganda machine that tried to influence the 2016 election is now promoting the presidential aspirations of. So they're saying she's in with bed with the Russia. Russia wants her to win. They're saying that they're right out in the open doing that. And again, we already did a video on this. We already we explained to you. I'll tell you again very quickly. NBC based this on a report by discredited people who got caught faking Russian bots already to influence the election in Alabama, and they lost their Facebook page over it. They don't tell you any of that, NBC News, about that this place where they got this info has already been discredited and kicked off Facebook. But they print it. No, that obviously didn't go through a meeting where there was editors vetting this material. That just got printed as a smear because NBC is funded by the military-industrial complex, oil companies, and Wall Street. That's why this happens. And they're joined at the hip with the Democratic Party, as Ed Schultz told us. And they want to smear Tulsi Gabbard because she's going to upset their apple cart. She doesn't take corporate money. And she's against the wars. So that's what they did to her. So she had to go on MSNBC. She went on MSNBC this morning, and she got smeared. Again, watch what... Well, someone put it perfectly. Representative Gabbard is challenging the standard narrative, the core of MSNBC's position, and the marching orders from their talking heads. So the core of MSNBC's position, she's challenging the core of MSNBC's positions and the marching orders that all those hosts get from their bosses. And we now know that they get them because Phil Donahue got fired for being against the war, the Iraq war. They fired him. And then it got revealed that they fired him because he was against the Iraq war. And they thought it would be bad for business. And then that happened. Okay, so here she goes. She goes on, and Casey Hunt is the genius behind this here. Watch this.
We are serious about the pursuit of peace. Do you think?
So that's her jumping off point, is that she's serious about the pursuit of peace. So that's going to get her in a lot of trouble. She's a progressive, and she's against the war. Oh, my God. They're going to come at her. Remember, they fired Phil Donahue for telling the truth about the war. They fired Ed Schultz for covering a progressive Bernie Sanders. She's a progressive, and she's against the war. Look out. Here we go.
Assad is our enemy. Assad is not the enemy of the United States because Syria does not pose a direct threat to the United States.
What do you say to Democratic voters who watched you go over there, and what do you say to military members who have been deployed repeatedly in Syria, pushing back against Assad?
Not what do you say to military members who are getting sent to another bullshit war for oil? Not that. That's not her question. Katie Hunt sounds like Dick Cheney and George Bush.
People who have been deployed to Syria have been there focused on their mission, which has been to defeat ISIS. Our troops have not gone to Syria to wage yet another costly, destructive regime change war. And many troops I hear from express frustration at the fact that our country continues to wage senseless, costly regime change wars, followed by nation-building missions, leading to situations like we see in Afghanistan. so many examples of our troops being deployed, their lives put on the line, without understanding what the clear mission or objective is and how that mission actually serves the security of the American people in the United States.
Which I think a lot of Americans would agree with you there. But again, going back to Assad is not an enemy. Is he an adversary of the United States?
We have to look to who poses a threat to the United States and the American
I understand that, but there are a lot of people who don't pose a direct military threat to the United States who consider themselves to be.
Why is Assad an adversary of the United States? Because we are trying to overthrow his government, Joe. And I wish she would have said that, but she doesn't. But that's the reason. And he acts like he doesn't know it. Here we go.
Adversaries of the United States. Vladimir Putin poses or considers America to be an enemy.
I have never heard Putin say that. Have you heard Putin say that? I think America is my enemy.
I've not heard him say that.
Now,
no.
This is just Cold War. This is just ramping up a Cold War. Hey, we have enemy. Again, Putin would go to Kennebunkport fishing with the Bushes. This is the same guy who George Bush said he looked into his soul. The same guy. And now it's just, hey, we got another Cold War, and we're all for it.
Jimmy, I just have to say this. I know we weren't going to stop it, but the fact is that she wants to have peace.
Yeah.
I thought that would be the first thing that this panel would celebrate.
Of course, no. You didn't really think that, though, right?
No, I did not. You would think in a
and by
real
the way,
world.
What makes all this worse is this is being done by journalists.
Okay.
Good night and good luck.
To be an adversary. I'm just asking, do you consider Assad to be an adversary of the United States?
When I look at whether it's Syria or Turkey or Russia or China or other countries in the world, I look at what are their interests and are their interests counter to our interests.
So all these people here's salary relies on the military-industrial complex, Wall Street, and of course Comcast. And they push every war, and of course, big fossil fuel oil companies. And so they're given a directive that you better take her down. And you know they have been given that directive. You got it. Look what they're doing to her. This is someone who's reflecting the will of the American people, which is get us out of these stupid interventionist wars, which is why a lot of people voted for Trump in the first place, because he said our Middle East policy was ridiculous. We should get out of there. She's reflecting that will. She went there. She's a veteran. You couldn't get more bona fides. Yet we got 6 jagoffs who've never been to war ever. Repeat CIA talking points. They work shoulder to shoulder with CIA people. They work shoulder to shoulder at MSNBC. They hire CIA people right from the CIA. And I'm not making that up. And that's what's happening. Because if you tell the truth, and they know goddamn well they can't tell the truth about war, or they will have their ass fired like Phil Donahue. That's what's happening right now. Look what they do. This is what journalists are doing
to a veteran.
To a veteran who's telling the truth about war. That's what the media does to them.
You say he is to the United States. If you cannot say that he's an adversary or an enemy, what is Assad to the U.S.?
What is the point of this question?
Yeah,
this is like Barack Obama. Will you say fundamental Islamic terrorism? That's what this is. They're doing it on MSNBC. They're not talking about what's the issue in Syria?
No, because that's what she's trying to tell them.
Right.
That's what she's trying to say. They won't let her.
Word.
You can describe it however you want to describe it.
I want to know how you describe it.
My point is that whether it is Syria or any of these other countries, we need to look at how their interests are counter to or aligned with ours.
Are Assad's interests aligned with ours?
What are Assad's interests?
Assad seems interested.
Oh,
that was so deft of her. What are Assad's interests? Casey Hunt has no idea what's going on in Syria. Look at that. You know what that look is? That's a Barry Weiss. That's what that is. That's, fuck. Somebody asked me a question about the shit that I've been spewing nonstop for 2 years. I've never actually examined this received opinion that I keep repeating, that was given to me by the liberal class and my bosses at MSNBC. No one's ever and she has no fucking idea. You want to hear what she says? Is what Assad?
Assad seems interested in the slaughter primarily of his own people, in part.
Yeah, he just out of nowhere decided, hey, let's go slaughter my own people. She has no idea what's going on in Syria. She has no idea that the CIA funded an overthrow of that government. And who did they fund? Al-Qaeda, al-Nusra. There's a story today in the news that Saudi Arabia just got caught funding Al-Qaeda again. Casey Hunt has no idea what's going on in Syria. She doesn't even know who Assad is fighting.
How does that line up? Survival, yeah.
She doesn't even know who we're fighting. She thinks that when troops go to Syria from America, that they're fighting Assad. That's what she thinks. No, what they're supposed to be doing is when American troops are in, they're supposed to be fighting ISIS. But of course, even the New York Times revealed on page 648 that the Pentagon funds and supplies and trains certain terrorists in Syria, and the CIA funds and trains certain other terrorists in Syria, and often they're fighting each other. And that's what Tulsi Gabbard found out when she went to Syria. And that's been printed in the New York Times. I'm not making that up. It's on page 648. And she has no idea. Just like Barry Weiss. She has no idea what she's even talking about. She has no idea. And listen, this is what I love Michael Tracy. He goes, actual question posed to Tulsi on Morning Joe. Is Assad a good person? There have been reports the Russian apparatus that interfered in 2016 is potentially trying to help your campaign. Why do you think that is? Have you met with any Russians over the past several years? These are all questions that they asked Tulsi Gabbard on Morning Joe. This is really happening. Right? Like that. The fact that we debunked their first article, we just did it. Look at the other, we'll link to the video under here. The jaw-dropping McCarthyite smear of Tulsi Gabbard that they did. And they based it on guys who have already been discredited and kicked off Facebook. And guess what? She doubles down. Casey Hunt doubles down on that. You ready? But before we get to that, this was Caitlin Johnson said this in an article. She said, the real thing they fear, meaning those corporate news puppets, the thing they fear is allowing Tulsi Gabbard, allowing her anti-interventionist ideas to take hold within the mainstream consciousness of a nation whose nonstop military interventionism is the glue that holds the empire together. So that's what you're watching when you watch, and it didn't end there. And to Casey Hunt, let me just give you a McCarthy tip of the hat. Because she went, after that interview, she went and she tweeted this garbage out. After people were giving her shit for it, and anybody who isn't blinded with Russiagate nonsense and propaganda saw what was happening. And so she went out and doubled down on her smear of Tulsi Gabbard, a veteran. Here is NBC's excellent reporting on the Russian machine that now appears. You know we debunked that, right? You saw that. I just told you at the top of this video, too, that this is based on those guys who were kicked off Facebook. That's not excellent reporting. That's horrible reporting. That's where you got this reporting from, Casey. So she's a liar, and she knows that's not excellent reporting. She knows that's horrible reporting because Casey Hunt is a liar for the establishment and a smear merchant. And she doesn't have any integrity, and she's a garbage human being. All those people are fucking garbage human beings. Do you see what they're doing to a veteran? Is that too much hyper? Am I being hyperbolic?
No, Jimmy, you used to talk about Sean Hannity, how Sean Hannity has his own fan base. He has his own supporters, but he would lie to his own viewers.
Right. So what they're doing, what Casey Hunt is doing is lying to their own viewers that they're doing propaganda. And did you see the whole crew? They wanted to pin her in and saying, well, what do you call Assad? What do you say? What in the fuck is wrong with you people? So she does this and she doubles down. And then when it was pointed out to her that this has been debunked, Casey Hunt says this. She goes, here is the debunking of the NBC News report from RT, the Russian state media. You tell me which you think is more credible. Well, guess what, you liar? Casey, you lie. Wow, Casey she really went double barrel liar, corporate tool, the worst kind of person in America. Because it wasn't RT that debunked it, Casey. Either you're so dumb like Barry Weiss, you don't even know that, and you're hired by NBC News, of course you are. Either you're that dumb that you don't know that, or you're a liar. You should quit journalism if you don't know that, and if you do, you're a liar, and you're going to get a raise for this. I'm going to bet she gets a raise.
Or her own show. If she
This was
doesn't
not
have one.
debunked by RT. This was debunked by the fucking New York Times. There's the article that tells you what the guys who wrote this article did in Alabama. They did the exact thing that you're claiming Russia's doing. They invented fake bots. They said they were Russian, and then they said they were supporting Roy Moore. Just like they invented fake bots, they said they were Russian, and then they said they were supporting her. So those guys got caught doing the exact thing. She says RT's the one. It's actually the New York Times who told us about it. And here's another, Glenn Greenwald, a Pulitzer Prize winner. He also told us about it. And since she doesn't know what the F is happening in Syria, here is Professor Jeffrey Sachs debunking you on the same MSNBC show that you revealed you had no idea what you were talking about on Syria and Tulsi. FYI, NBC fired Phil Donahue, and they'll fire you too if you tell the truth about war. Hey, FYI, she knows that. So here's Jeffrey Sachs. Do you want to say, I just play this very quickly? Here's Jeffrey Sachs on that very same show, not that same day, but on the very same TV set, talking to some of the very same idiots. Here we go.
But I think we have to step back and not put this in partisan terms. This is a U.S. mistake that started 7 years ago.
Syria.
And I remember the day on your show when President Obama said, Assad must go. And I looked at you and Joe and I said, how's he going to do that? Where's the policy for that?
Right.
And we know they sent in the CIA to overthrow Assad. The CIA and Saudi Arabia together in covert operations tried to overthrow Assad. It was a disaster. Eventually it brought in both ISIS as a splinter group to the jihadists that went.
It's funny that they don't interrupt him, stop him, try to debunk him, debate him, or say, why do you like Assad?
What's Assad? Is he an adversary?
Is he an adversary, Assad? Is he a good guy? What do you call him, Jeffrey? It's money. They're not going to do that to the professor because it hasn't been approved that you can smear him yet. But you can. It's been super approved. You can smear Tulsi Gabbard because she outed the DNC for being corrupt, and she's outing these wars for being corrupt. So now MSNBC, which is joined at the hip with the Democratic Party and the military-industrial complex, is now smearing Tulsi Gabbard 2-4. That's what's happening in this guy, and they're using red baiting to do it. McCarthyism. And this guy's telling the truth. It's that Syria is about us funding terrorists to overthrow a government so we can put a goddamn pipeline through Syria. He goes on. Watch how they don't push back, ever.
It also brought in Russia. So we have been digging deeper and deeper and deeper. What we should do now is get out and not continue to throw missiles, not have a confrontation with Russia. 7 years has been a disaster under Obama, continuing under Trump. This is what I would call the permanent state. This is the CIA, this is Pentagon, wanting to keep Iran and Russia out of Syria, but no way to do that. And so we have made a proxy war in Syria. It's killed 500,000 people, displaced 10 million. And I'll say predictably so, because I predicted it 7 years ago that there was no way to do this and that it would make a complete chaos. So what I would plead to President Trump is get out. Like his instinct told him, by the way. That was his instinct. But then all the establishment, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Pentagon, everybody said, no, that's
MSNBC.
irresponsible. But his instinct is...
He didn't say MSNBC, but he certainly could have. MSNBC said that's irresponsible.
Get out. We've done enough damage, 7 years. And now we really risk a confrontation with Russia that is extraordinarily dangerous, reckless.
Admiral Stavridis, President.
It's amazing that when they had Tulsi Gabbard on to dishonestly grill her, dishonestly twist what she's saying, they didn't have that guy on. Isn't that something that they didn't invite that guy back on when they had Tulsi on, the guy who knows a lot about it? Isn't it funny they didn't have Professor Stephen Cohen on it, who's the leading thinker on Russia and has been for 50 years? Isn't it amazing the people they bring on? Casey Hunt, that's what they bring on? They don't bring him on to ask Tulsi Gabbard. What more do you need to know about your corporate news? They're horrible. Now, you're not supposed to say they're the enemy of the people because that's what right-wing like Stalin and people like that would say against any enemy. They would go, oh, they're the enemy of the people, and they would get everybody to hate them. So that's why you're not supposed to say that because it's out. But I'm going to tell you right now, the corporate news is owned by the people we're supposed to be fighting. And they're carrying water for the people. Instead of exposing the military-industrial complex, they're attacking people who are exposing the military-industrial complex. That's what MSNBC does.
Well, that's the other interesting thing here. There were 4 people on that panel, so it was 4 against 1,
right.
Tulsi Gabbard being the one. And this is when they choose to hold a politician's feet to the fire. When it's a politician who's an actual anti-war, non-interventionist, that's when they try to hold their feet to the fire. You can BS about Medicare for all you want. They don't care. You can lie about that. No one will hold you accountable for that.
You can lie about wars.
You can lie about wars.
You can lie about WMDs. You can lie about anything.
Yep.
You can lie about tax cuts, create jobs. You can lie about trickle-down economics.
Yep.
You can lie about Medicare for all cause. You can lie about everything. You can lie about the minimum wage, cost jobs. You can do everything. They'll never push back. This is what they push back on. They push back on Tulsi Gabbard telling you the truth about Syria. But you notice they didn't push back on him. They didn't try to contradict it because they know that he knows better. And they know the guy's a fucking professor. But they can smear Tulsi Gabbard, boy.
Or at least try to smear her. You know, because I don't think these smears are sticking.
This hurts them. This is hurting. Again, of course, when you fired Phil Downey, it hurt you. When you fired Jesse Ventura, it hurts. When you fired Ed Schultz, this doesn't help you. It reveals who the people who remain working there are. We showed you a story just a few weeks ago. There was a career journalist who worked for NBC covering war. He quit. And he said, I can't be a part of this war machine anymore. They push war. So everybody who still works at NBC News is compromised, bought, and has less integrity than you do, and less integrity than a nightclub comedian. Me. Here's another great journalist. Pressed by Casey on NBC's reporting, Gabbard didn't dispute a single fact and instead said it had been discredited. When asked by whom, she wouldn't name them. I'll tell you who: RT, Russia, Insider, Sputnik, and Glenn Greenwald. Glenn Greenwald's a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist.
You always attack sources when you have no argument.
When you have no argument.
Whenever you attack sources first, it's because you have no argument. And also, if you want to talk about, Casey's reporting, well, gee, immediately in that segment, she had to be corrected as to why the troops are told they're in Syria.
She had no idea.
A politician had to correct her and tell her why the troops are in Syria. Journalist.
She thinks the troops are going there to fight Assad. They're not going there to fight Assad.
Mm-hmm.
They're supposed to be going there to fight the terrorists that we're actually funding and training ourselves. Because they're supposed to be overthrowing Assad. And by the way, let me go ahead.
I just wanted to say, regarding this tweet, when you cite that something has been discredited, you are obviously disputing the position you're taking.
Yes.
I mean, why does he say she didn't dispute a single fact, but she cited why it's been discredited? That's disputing it.
Well, and it wasn't just these people, by the way. It was the New York Times. There's the story about the people that again, he's just and now, so then this gets pointed out to this guy on Twitter, and watch what he says. Watch what he does. This is awesome. Now he defends the shitty reporting of New Knowledge that we've already debunked for you because they got kicked off Facebook because they're doing the exact thing they're accusing people of doing. On New Knowledge, this piece by cybersecurity reporter Craig Silverman makes it sound like it would be helpful to know more about AET and this small off-the-record meeting they had where a reporter had to sign an NDA to attend where the info was for... So this is the New York Times writing the article that outs NBC News. They're basing that bullshit story about Tulsi Gabbard being Russian on the people who are being debunked in this New York Times article, exposed for being grifters, for doing the exact thing they're accusing Tulsi Gabbard of doing. That's what this is. He's like, oh, he pretends it's not what it's about. And then this, I love it. She goes, oh no, now you're having to defend the fraudsters behind your Tulsi Gabbard report. Pretty soon you'll just admit she's right and you're behind a smear campaign for the neocons and the CFR. Council on Foreign Relations. So there you go. Just thought that was, so there you go. It's not stopping. They're ramping it up. And those motherfuckers at NBC News should be in prison. Everybody over there, like we pointed out, after World War II, they made it illegal to be a Nazi. That you can't give a Nazi salute or any of that. In the United States, after our Red Scare, it should have been made illegal to do a Red Scare again. And they're doing it to veterans on national TV, on a news show. She doesn't even know why the fucking troops are in Syria. Because MSNBC is a garbage news station. NBC News is corrupted, and they're funded by the people we're supposed to be fighting. And all those people there are compromised. Their integrity is compromised. And what is it compromised for? Money. $30,000 a day. And you watch who else doesn't cover this, by the way. That's also very revealing of where you should get your news from. If there are people who call themselves progressives who don't cover this and cover it correctly, that's all you need to know. We're announcing our live dates for 2019. We're going to Chicago and Portland, Seattle, New York, all over the country. Go to jimmydorcomedy.com for a link for all our tickets to all our shows. It'll be right underneath there, too. Please become a patron if you like our content and help support the show. You can become a patron for $5 a month, and we give you hours of bonus material. And make sure you're subscribed. They unsubscribe people every day. I'm not kidding. Make sure you're subscribed and click that bell so they give you a notice when we drop a video. It's the only thing we can do to fight back against the bastards. Thanks for your support.